There are 9 distinct different ways that you can play Rainbow Six Siege effectively. These are the 9 roles of Rainbow Six Siege. To break it down for you, every role is just essentially a different playstyle. It matters less what character you're playing and what utility you're using, and it matters more the playstyle in which you are using it. With that out of the way though, let's go into the first role of today's video, which is the entry fragger. Now, because most people hear entry fragger, keyword fragger, they immediately think that their job as an entry is to get kills. This is not necessarily the case most of the time. Actually, your job is to take space, and to take space very, very early. It just so happens that when you need to take space, it's way easier to do it when you kill the person that is holding that space, which is why fragging is such a huge part of entrying, and it is why it has been dubbed entry fragging instead of just entrying. So yes, your job is to get kills, but it's not solely for just getting a kill on the board and giving your team that man advantage. It's actually so that you can get the space that the person you killed was holding. So if your job is to take space and to take it quick, how do you do that? And what do you even do? Well, if your job is to take space and to get kills to take space, then obviously you want the best weapons, and you want to be able to do it quickly, which means you want a 3-speed. That is why some of the best entry fraggers are people like Ash and people like Buck. They're not 3 armors, and they have great guns that allow them to actually entry frag. They both have utility that has soft destruction, allowing them to fastly take space by breaking walls or doors, which makes both of these people prime candidates for entry fragging and the entry fragging playstyle. Of all of the roles on this list, this is arguably one of the easiest, as all you really have to do is get droned in by your supports, take space, get a kill, and your job is pretty much cut out for you after that. Most of your role and your job is in the early round, which is completely unlike the next role on this list, which is the hard support on attack. Now, hard supports on attack are anybody that gets a hard wall open, hence the name hard support. So this typically includes people like Thermite, Hibana, or even an ace if there is no other hard breach. You can make an argument for the shield player also being a hard support player, but like I said earlier in the video, roles aren't really about the operator you're playing, it's more about the playstyle, which is why you'll have some people run a hard breach and a shield, and they'll have the flex player play the shield because they play the shield in a flex playstyle. Whereas sometimes they'll have the flex player play the hard breach and the hard support player play the Monty because they play Monty in a very hard support way that matches their team's playstyle. So again, it's less about really the operators and is more about the playstyle. But if it's about the playstyle so much, what is the playstyle of a hard support? Well, the playstyle of a hard support is very slow and utility heavy. A lot of the times you're supporting your teammates by opening walls to get lines of sight on the enemies that your entries are trying to kill. For example, if you have an entry and he's trying to take rafters from the rafters door, getting the wall open as a hard support player into CC helps your fragger out immensely, and it gives him a lot of support because then the rafters player can only sit in a few positions, allowing your entry fragger to pre-fire him a lot easier. You supported not only your entry fragger by droning him in, which is what you're supposed to do, and getting a wall open for him, but now typically you have the best utility to get the bomb down. If you're playing Thermite, you have smokes where you can smoke top red off, or you have flashes to be able to do a flood onto site and cover the person getting the bomb down. Again, it's much more about the playstyle of supporting your teammate by doing a certain thing than it is about any operator, so I really don't want you going into the list thinking about operators. But one role on this list that is a little bit more operator oriented than any other is soft support on attack. Now, what are soft supports? Well, you might think that because hard support means hard breach, that soft support means soft breach, but that's not actually the case. A soft support is somebody that supports the hard support. How do you support a support? Well, if you're playing Thermite and you need to get a wall open, but it's electrified, you need somebody with EMPs. You need a Thatcher, you need an Osa, you need a Gridlock, or somebody that's going to sit outside the breach with you to hold angles and support your supportage. That is what soft support does. It's a support to a support. Typically, in competitive teams, you have not one person, but 2 people droning in your entries. And you guessed it, it's the hard support and the soft support. So you pretty much do everything that hard support does, just with different utility. Instead of using hard breach charges, you use EMPs. Not all that different, but definitely something I thought would be necessary to mention in today's video. Like I said, it is much more operator specific for this role than any other role, so operators that you should aim to play if you want to play this role are Thatcher, Maverick if you're not Maverick tricking, anybody with EMPs, so Osa, Gridlock, Dokkaebi, Lion, sometimes even Nook, or even certain flex operators that you don't need EMPs for, like Twitch or Zero. But Zero specifically is better at another role than he is at soft support, and that's actually our next role in this video, the flank watch role. This role has kind of fallen out of popularity in the competitive scene, especially the higher you go, because if you just have cutoff drones, you don't really need one person dedicated to this role. However, in ranked, it's a lot more necessary to have somebody on the flank watch duty. Flank watch is anybody who brings their drone in the prep phase and makes a cutoff drone. A cutoff drone is essentially a drone that you place in a flank position that you know that you're going to have to worry about later. For example, if you push up a staircase to get to a wall, to get to the site, you would need a drone on that staircase to make sure no one flanks you from that staircase. The flank watch person on that team would try to get their prep phase drone on that staircase to cut off the flank so that nobody could flank you. In the middle of the round, after your teammates have been droned in and you've taken space, your job is to watch this flank camera. If you have a teammate who dies, he will be the one to watch that flank camera, and then you can sit in the back of your team as they're getting kills so that if someone does come to the flank, you can turn around and kill them easier. If you don't want to do it with cutoff cameras, because maybe you're playing solo queue ranked and you like an ability to watch the flank better, your best bet would be gridlock. But if you actually want to watch the cams and get kills with the cams, then your best bet actually would be zero. With his recent buff where now he has 6 cameras and the ability to bring claymores, he is the perfect flank watch operator for most solo queue players. But if you're looking for somebody in the competitive scene to play, I definitely recommend Nomad or Gridlock. Nomad is much better for runouts than she is for flanks comparative to Gridlock, and Gridlock is much better in an environment where you're using shields to rush, and considering that shields are the meta right now, it makes sense that you play Gridlock most of the time when you play this role. But again, not really about the operator, it's about the playstyle, and any single operator you bring can have the playstyle of having a cutoff drone and watching the flank. So don't worry about the operators too much. Speaking of not worrying about the operators, the next role that I'm going to go over is arguably the least reliant on operators, because their entire job is actually to flex to a different operator depending on what you need. If you haven't guessed already, this role is the flex role. The flex role flexes to whatever you need, whether it be flexing operators or flexing your playstyle. What do I mean? Well, let's say you have every operator figured out on your team that you need. You have the Thatcher, you have the Thermite, you have the Ash, and you have the Yana to go in and get kills. Maybe even a Zero instead to watch your flank. Well, who do you play? Honestly, it depends on what you want to do. A lot of the times, flex players do things solo. They hold off cutoffs. They're typically the people to watch flanks as well. Flank watch, by the way, is just a subcategory of your flex player, but little niche titles aside, your flex does what needs to be done when it needs to be done. So you typically play operators that can do pretty much everything. Operators like Lion and Dokkaebi are great examples. They bring so much utility. Smoke grenades, EMP grenades, flash or frag grenades as well. Dokkaebi can also bring a Gon 6 and has the ability to get either passive or aggressive based off the information she provides. Same exact thing for Lion. So people that have the most versatile loadouts can easily have the most versatile playstyles as well. And that's exactly what a flex player does. If you see that your entry fraggers die and you need to have that aggression on the board, you become the entry fragger. If you have the utility because you played the right operators on flex and your supports died, like a Thatcher, then you would use your EMPs to get the wall instead. You essentially flex to what is needed based off of what your team is lacking. Again, whether it be from operator selection, playstyle, positioning, whatever it may be, you flex to what your team needs. Of all the roles that I'm going to talk about in this video, this is the hardest to play, whether you're on attack or defense. It's because you have to know how to play every other role in order to play flex correctly. Because again, you're flexing to play other roles. That's your entire job. It is the most high stress position that you can play, and arguably, you should have the most strategic, smart person play this role, while the person with the best mechanics plays entry. Now, the last role that I'll go over before we move it on to the defense is the IGL. This is less of a playstyle and an operator and more of just a personality trait. The IGL stands for in-game leader. IGL. That's what that means. The IGL is a role designated to a person who leads what you're doing. If you know that they're going to a top floor site, well, how are you going to push? Are you going to push front side or back side? That is completely determined by the IGL. If an operator needs to be changed based off of a push or based off of bans or based off the map you're playing, the IGL decides what operators are played and what operators aren't played. This isn't set in stone. Most of the time, if you have a good suggestion and you say it, the IGL, if it's, acceptable, will say, hey, let's do that. That's a good idea. So you're not necessarily the person that has to make the ideas, but you're the one that finalizes them. You're the highest in command. If you say something, even if people think it's a dumb idea, they gotta trust you and do it because they put you in that position of IGL. Now, typically, the best way that you can lead in-game and in real life is by doing it and not just talking about it, which is why the IGL typically wants to stay alive the longest in the round. round. So if you're looking for one role that suits the IGL the best, in my opinion, it would be hard or soft support. Maybe if you're playing shields on flex, it could make sense, but your entries never really should be the IGL because they're the ones that are dead first and they can't really see or control or feel the round out as well as people who are alive, meaning it's just not the best for them to be the IGL. If you naturally are a leader or just like to play more passively and see things from a bird's eye view mentally, then the IGL role may be for you. But now that we've gone over all of the attacking and ambidextrous roles, let's move on to the defense specific roles, starting out with the support on defense. Now, unlike the support on attack, there's not two different supports on defense. There is just support and support too. Because you know typically on attack that you have to have a wall open, the hard support is always going to be a hard support. He's always going to be a hard breach because there's always a wall that needs to get open. Where on defense, it's not really the case. Sometimes you don't need to keep a wall closed. Sometimes you'll just put a mute jammer on it and hope to God that they don't have EMPs. Or sometimes you'll just leave it open and then play with a Mira, just, you know, having the wall open, and that's kind of just your strat. Sometimes you'll just put feed holes on the wall. It doesn't matter. So it's a lot more dependent on the site and the strat that you're going, meaning that supports on defense really aren't set in stone in any operators. The support on defense could be a Mira, but so could the flex operator. Even so could the entry if he's roaming. It doesn't really matter. So the roles that we go over on defense are much less operator specific than the roles on attack, especially support. But the play style of support is very specific. What a round will typically look like for a support player on defense is the first thing you'll do, get on cameras. Because you're not roaming, you're not going to have first contact, and you're not going to be the person in gunfights immediately. You're not going to be spawn peeking, running out. You're just going to be sitting on site, not really doing anything. So if site is already set up, then you need to immediately get on cameras. Based on the outside cameras that you're looking at, or the ones that have been shot, you can easily tell where the attackers are pushing from. All you have to do then is call out to your roamers, hey, they're pushing here, and now your roamers know exactly where to roam and what to do. Just like that, based off of one call out at the beginning of every single round, you easily have helped your roamers and supported them in any way you need to. If you need to, supports on defense also typically will keep walls closed, whether it be Cade, Turbo, Mute, Bandit, or impact tricking if you're doing it through a drone hole. RIP wall impact tricking. But that's pretty much what supporting on defense looks like. It's really simple. You play passive, you sit on cams, you use utility, and then once they hit the site, you have to stop them from getting the bomb down. One thing I will say is if you want to be a good support on defense, you have to be good at clutch scenarios. If you are not good at clutch scenarios, support is going to suck for you because a lot of the times when you're playing support and your teammates die and they're about to rush site and you're in a 2v5, I mean, really, that just happens a lot. So you have to learn how to play those and what to do. Otherwise, you're going to suffocate on support. Me personally, I play support on defense because I am just really good at clutch scenarios, whereas in the beginning of the round, sometimes I'll be over aggressive and just die immediately when it's a 5v5. For some reason, I'm better at 2v5s than I'm at 5v5s, so naturally, I was just put on support as a defender player. So if playing passive, getting on cams, using utility, and having the clutch gene in you is not something that you can have, then don't play this. But if you do, then I definitely recommend that you play this role. Let's move on to arguably the hardest role that you have to play on defense, which is the same as attack, and that is the flex. Now, for the same exact reason that flex is hard on attack, is the same exact reason that flex is hard on defense. You have to constantly be switching between roaming, anchoring, being aggressive, and being not aggressive. Now, with defense, it's pretty easy to see how exactly you're playing because you have rooms that pretty much reflect exactly how you're playing. For example, if you're roaming 4 rooms deep all the way away from site, obviously you're playing pretty aggressive as a roamer. As an anchorer, if you're sitting on site, obviously you're playing passive. So for defense, it's really easy to see just based off of what room you're in, the type of play style that you have, which means playing as a flex on defense is just a little bit easier than playing a flex on attack. If you know when to manage your aggression, but not necessarily how, you can just kind of be like, okay, well, I'm gonna be passive by backing up a room, or maybe not holding this room with my life. And that's how you think as a flex player. Do I need to help my roamers, or do I need to fall back to site and help my supports? That's all you have to think about. A role that is arguably even more brainless though, is roamers on defense. These are the people that typically would play entry on attack, and all you're really doing is getting kills. Actually, I just lied to you. That's the last thing you need to worry about. There's a common misconception that most people need to be getting kills when they're roaming, just like there's a common misconception that you need to be getting kills when you're entering. Not only is this inaccurate, but it's blatantly just not true, especially on defense. You see, on defense, space matters. What is space? It's your ability to maintain control of rooms. If you have a lot of rooms under your control that the attackers don't have, you have a lot of space. The more space you can maintain for the longer amount of time, the more you've done your job as a roamer. Because think about it, if you're an attacker and you've wasted 2.5 minutes out of 3 minutes of the round around trying to roam clear a guy, so you only have 30 seconds once you kill that guy to hit site, go for a plant, and get 4 kills, that's gonna be really hard for you to do. So as a roamer, your job is to waste time by managing space. How you manage space is map dependent. If you're on a small map, you want to be aggressive with your space because you don't have much space to control in the first place. Whereas on bigger maps like Nighthaven Labs, you have a lot of space that you can kind of play around with and move around with, so you can be a lot more passive and just give up rooms the second they drone you. But again, the key thing about how to play a roamer is not to get kills, but it is to waste time. If you get 0 kills, but you waste 2 minutes of their time, you will have done a much more efficient job of roaming than somebody who gets 2 kills and waste absolutely no time. But with it out of the way, that is it for today's video. I hope you learned something. My name's Alka, and check out this next video. Later.